Hello everybody and welcome to another gear video. So in past videos I've talked about my emergency and recovery gear. I also did a video about my camp kitchen setup, but I kind of wanted to continue that conversation today and talk about some of the other gear. And today I'm going to be talking about kind of the miscellaneous random pieces of gear that are important but maybe not important enough to do a whole video on right now. So the first half of this video will be out here at camp. I'm going to show you some of this stuff and some other stuff back there. And then the second half of the video will be back at home. I'll show you my gear storage and some of the overflow gear that doesn't always make it on every single trip. So with that, let's get into some of the gear. And the first thing is this right here. This is my table, my trusty table that I do all of my cooking on. It holds the camp box. It also serves as a great workspace around camp if I'm not cooking. Not overly huge, big enough probably a couple people could sit around here and eat. You could play a game of cards, it can hold some drinks. So not massive, but it folds down to a really small area, and that is really handy. And it sets up in about 2 minutes. And I've had this thing for quite a while. I'd say ever since I got my first tent. That was probably 5 or 6 years ago. So so far so good. So next up is just this camp chair. I got quite a few of these at home. I always just grab a red one when I go out by myself, but not overly expensive. I don't think it's even branded. I think it's a generic chair, but it holds up for my purposes. I'm not really sitting too much when I'm at camp for too long anyway. So next up is this. This is my camp light, which is nothing more than just a basic video light. So I use this a lot for a lot of different purposes. When I'm out camping, I put it on this nice stand. It has levels where I can raise and lower it as high as I want. And it's really good. It's controllable, it's dimmable, it goes up pretty bright, especially at night. And it's battery operated, so that is really nice. So it's got 2 banks for batteries here in the back, as well as the dimmer switches and the power switch. So this can be put anywhere, it's not attached to anything via a cord. And if you do want to plug it in, it does have that option too. Just the standard plug on the back will attach to any normal outlet. So if I wanted to, I could plug it into my battery box, but I really like the portability that the battery packs give you. So it can last for about 5 to 6 hours, depending on how bright you have it turned up. So definitely enough to give you at least 1 or 2 full nights. You can always recharge it throughout the day as you go. And it's really nice. I use it for a lot of other things. Obviously for videos, it comes in super handy. And then if we're out working in the garage or something, it's just handy having a light. And this is just a basic video light off Amazon. I'll put a link somewhere. You can check it out. I got a couple of these, and these are very handy. So next up, I want to talk about this, which is my cooler. This is an Arctic 45 cooler. If you don't know what Arctic is, it's basically a competitor to Yeti. Some people might call it a knockoff, but I don't remember the exact price of this cooler, but it was significantly cheaper than the similar sized Yeti. And I've been super happy with it. So it's big enough to hold all the stuff I need on those longer trips, meats, beer, drinks, spoilables, stuff like that. It fits in there really well, and it's not too big and heavy to where I can't carry it by myself. So it's got the handles built in. It's also got these kind of rope handles on it. Very nice. And it's got drain plugs on each side, which makes it super easy to get water out. As far as the coldness of the cooler, I am blown away. So my prior cooler was a kind of roll, a basic roll cooler with wheels on it, and it was terrible. I would be lucky if it would last a day when out camping. So when I upgraded to this, I was really shocked. So basically, you want to minimize the open enclosure of it and trying to keep it topped off with as much ice as you can. But this thing will last a solid 4 to 5 days, maybe even a week, depending on the conditions. It keeps everything in there super cold. So definitely something I like. Again, I'm coming from that basic cooler, but I've had this for the last 2 to 3 years now, and it's still holding up good, and I'm still very happy with it. So another thing that comes with me on all my trips that you probably don't see is this. This is what I call my go bag. Just a backpack with some essentials and things that I need throughout the trip. So keep some clothes in there, extra clothes, as well as what I plan on wearing. Keep some flashlights, extra lights, you know, things for looking around camp if I need to. I keep a UV light. Here in Arizona, that's pretty handy. Looking around for scorpions and whatnot. But, you know, basic stuff that comes in handy throughout the trip, and I always keep that close to my person. So if I had to hike out or something, this is probably the backpack I would take. Might have to rearrange a little bit, but it's essentially packed up with everything I need for the trip. So these are all of the basics of camp. You know, nothing fancy going on here, but just enough to have what I need to be comfortable when I'm out camping. So I keep some stuff up in the tent, you know, sleeping bag, pillow, weapons, stuff like that is all pretty self-explanatory. So that pretty much wraps up out here in the field. The rest of this video will be from home, where I'm going to show you some of the gear storage, as well as some of the other gear that I can plug in and take out as needed on my trip. So see you at home. All right, so we've made it back home, and just real quickly before I end the video, I do want to show you a little bit of the gear storage and extra gear that I don't necessarily bring with me on every trip. So I try to keep everything pretty organized on these shelves here. On the bottom is where the camp box goes. If you've seen the camp box video, you've seen me slide it in and out. I keep it on a 4-wheel cart. It's not currently in there right now, but I use the 4-wheel cart to easily roll the box out to my Jeep wherever I'm parked. It's very simple to then load it into my Jeep from there. And likewise, when I get back home, just unload it onto the cart and then roll it right back in here in this designated spot. It fits perfectly. Just behind the post here, you might not be able to see it too well, but I keep my 5-gallon gas can. It's not something I bring with me very often. If I want to be doing a longer trip, I might load it up. I keep the mounting hardware for that on the wall behind the camera there. Real simple to mount that to the bumper on my Jeep. Moving on to this bottom shelf here, this is kind of sleeping bag headquarters. I have multiple different sleeping bags, kind of depending on the climate of where I'm going to be going. The coldest bag I have is a 10 to 30 degree bag. Green one here is a 30 to 50 degree bag. And the red one here is my warmest. It's a 40 to 70 degree bag. So I also keep a cheaper, older sleeping bag back there as well. I don't use that one often, but I like the variety because the kinds of trips I'm doing, I could be in the desert one time, or I could be up in the mountains at high elevation the next time. So it really depends on where I'm going to be going and what the weather looks like. That's something I always check before. I check the lows, and then I'll make my my pick based on that. If it's going to be really cold, you know, below kind of the 10 to 30 degree range, I might bring 2 sleeping bags. And what I've done before is I put one inside of the other. So that keeps you very toasty for those really cold nights. I haven't run into any issues with that. Also too, if I go out camping with family or friends, they don't have a sleeping bag, they could easily borrow one of mine. So I try to keep a little bit extra, that way for people that might be going with me, I have enough to cover me and I have enough to cover them as well. I also keep my fire extinguisher in here out of the extreme heat, and there's a smaller sleeping bag back there as well. Moving up to this middle shelf here, you can see the camp table. This is where I keep that. So behind the table, I keep some of my older gear, stuff I don't really use as much anymore. I've got 2 air mattresses up there. So back in the days when I used my ground tent a lot, I would bring air mattresses to really kind of have a comfortable night of sleep. I keep the air mattress pump here as well. And then underneath the air mattresses is one of my older tents. You can see the other tent up here on the top shelf. So I didn't always have a rooftop tent. I started with a very basic, very cheap 2-person tent up there. And then I graduated eventually to the 3-person tent, slightly bigger, a little bit more roomy. And then today I've graduated to the rooftop tent. But like the sleeping bags, I like to keep the older tents around. It's great if I'm going out with family or friends. The rooftop tent really doesn't hold much more than 2 people. So if I do have more people or I want to set up multiple tents, it's very simple to bring one of these small tents and pop it up somewhere nearby. Up on the top shelf here, kind of some random stuff, not too much up here. Of course, got the tent. Got a couple of big ground stakes if I ever want to tie something off or tie something down at camp. And I keep my lanterns up here as well. So that's something I normally bring with me. I'll usually hang it up off the tent, and then in the hours between dinner and when I go to bed, I'll keep that lit up just to kind of provide some ambient camp light. I usually turn that off when I go to bed, but it's nice to have that little bit of extra light Of course, I showed you the video lights earlier. I'm actually using 2 of them right now to help light this up a little better, but between all those different lights, I usually get some pretty good ambient camp lighting after dark. So I'm going to move over to this side now and show you real quickly what's here. Nothing too much going on. Down at the bottom, I think just out of view of the camera, is my 5-gallon water jug. I have some other miscellaneous stuff here that my dad's shoved in this shelf. So this shelf here is for the traction pads. I'll usually keep a bundle or 2 of wood here just for easy access, depending on where I'm going, but we're coming up to the summer months here in Arizona, so my supply has dwindled a little bit. Underneath the traction pads are some more miscellaneous Jeep parts. I have a steering stabilizer for whatever reason. So again, this shelf is also for kind of some miscellaneous gear. I've got my headrests for my back seats. When I fold those down, I like to keep them here at home just to keep them out of the way and keep them clean. This bag here is for the rooftop tent. It's got the annex, it's got some spare parts. Not something I really need to use very often, so it pretty much just parks on that shelf. And then this top shelf is just some different food containers, light covers, a couple of different tarps. Again, not stuff I use too often, but it's a nice area to store some of the miscellaneous stuff. Now just up above my head, which I don't think you can see, I keep my camp chairs. I've got 2 red ones up there right now. I also keep a gun case up there. And then moving past the Christmas lights, which are not part of my setup, I've got my cooler up here on this side. So again, the cooler is not too heavy. I'm able to easily lift it up there. It parks right there on the corner. Real easy to get to whenever I need it. And then finally, a couple more camp chairs can fit right here, hanging up on the shelf, and I got a couple more tarps stacked up as well. So that's the basics of camp gear. I've showed you the stuff I use out in the field on a trip, and you've seen the storage and extra gear that I might not bring with me on every trip. So again, I like to keep it pretty organized. That way it's easy to see what I have. Usually within the following hours or days of coming back from a trip, I'll just put everything back where it belongs. And then before the next trip, it's real easy to come out here and pull exactly what I need. I can see everything real easily. I'll put that stuff into a pile. That pile will go into the Jeep, and then I'm ready for a trip as soon as all that stuff is loaded up. So I do appreciate you watching this one today. I just wanted to take some time and talk about some of the basics. It's not something I talk about particularly in the other videos. It's real easy to overlook some of the simple things, but I hope I was able to convey that today. Feel free to comment down below if you have your own cool storage idea, or if you have any questions. I'd love to hear that as well. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.